So whenever you read a part of the Bible, you have to ask certain questions. I'll give you just one very quick example, which is in a way trivial. When you come across the word Israel in the Bible, at one point in the Bible, Israel is another name for Jacob. Another point in the Bible, Israel are the tribes of Israel. Another point in the Bible, Israel is the northern kingdom, as opposed to all of Israel. Another part of the Bible, Israel is Greater Israel, the northern and southern kingdoms. Another part of the Bible, Israel is in exile in Mesopotamia. So depending on what part of the Bible you're reading, Israel will have different meanings. This is very, very crucial. You always have to ask, what is the context for any part of the Bible you read? And the context is both time and space. It's both historical context and geographical context. Now, in terms of history, we can, a convenient beginning place would be King David reigning in over all the tribes of Israel. He reigns partly at Hebron, and then he moves his capital to Jerusalem. David reigns for 40 years, and you can pin that on our timeline, say from around 1000 to 960 BCE. David is succeeded by his son Solomon, who reigns for 40 years from around 960 to around 920 BCE. These dates can shuffle back or forward a couple of years, but it's trivial. It's more or less in those times. Now, this means that just for 80 years only, Israel exists as a united kingdom under David and then Solomon. Before that, it didn't exist as a united kingdom, and after that, it didn't exist as a united kingdom. But the united kingdom of Israel, all the tribes together under one king, only existed for 80 years. Before that, you had the attempt of a monarchy of King Saul, which went very, very badly. Before that, you had the period of the judges, when the Israelites, having settled in the land, anarchy prevailed. And before that, you have the period of the Exodus and the period of the slavery in Egypt. And then before that, you have the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So moving forward from the period of the United Kingdom, you then have what we call the Neo-Assyrian period. So the kingdoms have split into Israel in the north. The capital is Samaria, Shechem, and then Judah in the south, the capital is Jerusalem. The Davidic monarchy, the descendants of David, continues in the south in Jerusalem, but it's a smaller kingdom. It's really just Judah and Benjamin and some hangers-on, whereas in the north, that's where the majority of the tribes are. And there you have a series of military rulers. Often another coup happens and an entire family gets wiped out and a new general takes over. The monarchies in the north, therefore, is a lot more unstable, whereas the monarchy in the south remains stable. It has the temple that Solomon built, and it has a certain stability there. Now, the Neo-Assyrians, by the end of the 8th century, around the year 722, 721 BCE, the Neo-Assyrians destroy the northern kingdom of Israel. So our numbers that are important here are David around 1000, Solomon around 960, the division of the kingdom around 920, and then we jump down 2 centuries to around 722, 721, where the Neo-Assyrians wipe out the northern kingdom and take the Israelites into exile in Mesopotamia. The southern kingdom continues until 586 BCE, when Jerusalem is destroyed by the Neo-Babylonians. So we have the period of the United Monarchy, Divided Monarchy, Neo-Assyrians, Neo-Babylonians, and it's the Neo-Babylonians who destroy Jerusalem in 586 BCE. Now they carry off the Judeans into exile, and an amazing thing happens in exile. It's in exile in Mesopotamia that the Israelites, who've been there for a couple of centuries, meet up with the Judeans, and a restoration happens, a national restoration happens. And you see this especially in the book of Ezekiel, where Ezekiel starts to speak about Israel and Judah coming together again, and Israel is greater Israel once more. And the prophet Isaiah prophesied of this, saying, "Therefore the redeemed of the Lord shall return and come as singing unto Zion." So we get the idea that when the restoration happens 70 years later, at the end of the 6th century BCE, the Jews come back from Mesopotamia to settle again in Jerusalem as a united kingdom once more, except with no king. They do not have a king at this point. They are subservient to the Persian Empire by this point. So we've gone United Kingdom, divided kingdom, Neo-Assyrians, Neo-Babylonians, and then we come to the Persians, who allow the Jews to return back and rebuild at the end of the 6th century. Now, after the Persians, you have a chap called Alexander the Great, who overthrows the Persian Empire. In many respects, you can see him as being the last of the Persian emperors. He takes on a lot of Persian garb in the way he takes over the Persian Empire. After the death of Alexander, towards the end of the 4th century, you have the division of Alexander's kingdom, and in terms of Jewish history, this falls into two Greek nations, or empires, the Ptolemaic Greek Empire in Egypt and the Seleucid Greek Empire in Mesopotamia and in Syria. And the Jewish nation are, as Josephus put it, like a small ship tossed between two mighty waves. These two Greek empires are fighting each other in this series of wars, and the Jews are stuck in the middle of these two vast empires. Now, for most of pretty well all of the 3rd century BCE, the Jews are living under Ptolemaic rule, governed from Egypt, and it's a very peaceful period for them on the whole. But when we come into the beginning of the 2nd century BCE, the Seleucid Greek Empire takes over the land of Israel from the Ptolemies. And this then becomes a very difficult time for the Jews living in their land. Especially, this culminates in the persecutions of a Seleucid Greek king called Antiochus Epiphanes, Antiochus IV, in the first half of the 2nd century BCE, who unleashes a vicious persecution against the Jewish nation, which is described in great detail in the book of Daniel. We come across this new genre of writing in the book of Daniel, apocalypticism. And he's described as a little horn. It's an insulting term towards him. A little horn. Horn was the Macedonian emblem of kingship, so it's definitely Antiochus who's being discussed here. And Antiochus did terrible things against the Jewish nation. This culminated in the sacrifice of a pig on the Jewish altar, desecrating the Holy of Holies, and in essentially compelling the Jews to abandon Judaism and become just like everybody else. A lot of Jews went along with this, but a lot didn't, and those that didn't led an uprising, and it's commemorated today in the festival of Hanukkah, the Feast of Dedication, which tells how the Jews took back their city and their temple from the Seleucids, and for the first time in centuries, for the first time really since going back to the Neo-Assyrian period, you suddenly have an independent Jewish state again with its capital in Jerusalem in the middle of the 2nd century BCE. Now this only persists because they get the backing of Rome. And this is how Rome comes into the political scene in a very powerful way. Rome stabilizes the Jewish state, but after a while Rome's interests increase. Rome is concerned with matters further east, the Parthian Empire being their chief rivals in the east, and so Judea becomes a very important frontier province, and the Romans come in and they just take over by the time Jesus comes along. So when Jesus is walking and living in Judea, the Romans are in control, and so it's Roman power which is very important in terms of the trial of Jesus and the legality of his execution, and it's Rome which is in control at the time of the birth of Christianity. So Christianity has to grow against this backdrop of empire with a cult of the emperor and things like this. Rome destroys Jerusalem around the year 70 CE, destroys the temple. To this day, this destruction of the Jewish state is commemorated in the city of Rome through monuments like the Colosseum, which was built with the money coming from the proceeds of the sale of Jewish slaves, and the Arch of Titus, which shows the Jewish booty from the temple being carried triumphantly into Rome.